Chapter 35/36 Pissing in Paradise. What Jack was confronted with was more in line with what you could expect in a leprosy house, out in Jerusalem after the Crusades. Dank, stinky air filled with the smell of putrefaction and disease, with wounded angels festering in their sores, and covered in pustules. The petitioners themselves seemed weary and sick, and the whole place had an overwhelming aura of death and defeat. Jack was confronted by a particularly angry Lady of Charity, whose blackened hair was dropping in dry tatters, eyes yellow with rheumatism. She gazed at the legion of bright-eyed saved ones with a mixture of disgust, remorse, pity, and anger, before calming down a notch and giving Jack a tour of the facilities. She stopped in front of a big marble fountain, from which thick, greenish water flowed. "So it has been you who has poisoned our waters," she told Jack, trying to remain as calm as possible, evidently failing. "Filled our waters with sin and corruption." All Jack could do was point at her with both hands, smile, and say, "Yeah, about that." Jack managed to get himself kicked out of the healing house by a mob of angry petitioners, and eventually made his way back into Saltzbed. After hearing what happened, the party decided on two things. First, they would considerably step up security around the pumps, fearing some sort of retaliation now that they understood why Archons were so keen on watching their actions. They thought for a moment about getting an evil-infused rock from Avernus, but eventually came to their senses and remembered that the whole point was to seem like they were doing it for good reasons. Instead, Hassan had the idea of sending elderly people from Saltzbit into quote-unquote healing groves, designed around the pumps. The elderly were selected through a lottery, which was sold at 1 copper piece per ticket. It eventually became quite a success. The idea was to put so many frail people in the area that no good-aligned being would dare to mount an attack. Second, Valanar decided to take the negotiations on his own. Through their contacts in the Church of Desna, they managed to secure a priest in Opera, who would put them in contact with a powerful entity from Celestia. They offered a substantial donation to the church in exchange for the priest visiting them in Saltzbed, and carried out the ritual, meeting with Arboris, one of the many servants of Desna. Though Arboris had a disfavourable reaction at first, after all, Valanar does not exactly beam out with goodness, Valanar managed to convince him that the very reason they were doing this was to atone for their sins. His massively overpowered bluff roll, coupled with a will saving throw to avoid having his mind read that passed by the skin of his teeth, helped smooth things through, and eventually Arboris had to recognize that the party was indeed saving tortured souls from damnation. When one of the saved ones showed up to be a fallen former paladin of Desna, I gave them a 20% chance for it to happen and they got lucky. It all clicked, and Arboris decided to help the players. After they explained then the issue with Cordelia, Arboris offered to act as an intermediary to calm off the Lady of Charity. Since the pumps were not attacked, the party assumed it worked, even though the waters had indeed started to turn thick, pestilent, and slightly acidic to the touch, as their saving continued. Valanar kept contact with Arboris, and together they worked on the organization of a better financed force. The angel offered the party access to substantial wealth, but the priest noted they had enough money themselves. Instead, he asked for assistance in more meaningful, hard-to-attain ways. 3 weeks later, Arboris returned with a pack of old scrolls from Celestia's library, detailing 3 magnificent treasures that would be able to assist them.